My name is Rosemary Rivera. I'm the co-executive director of Citizen Action of New York. And I just want to say to all of you, thank you so much for coming here and joining us. Thank you to the media, district members, parents, students. I wanted to share with you the fact that 5 years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, sometime in 2014, we stood at the atrium of this school and we released the breaking news features in Pipline report. And it was something that was incredibly, I think that we had a lot of anecdotal information about the fact that students were being suspended at high rates throughout the Rochester City School District and that it was having an academic impact. Here we are 5 years later and there has been so much work done. There has been collaboration between community and the district. And the report, this became a landmark report, which galvanized and concretely showed exactly what the problem was. And we kind of came together, and today I want to show some love to that district because we actually have a new report that now looks at the data of the work that we've done and shows that there is a concrete correlation between the work that we've done and academic achievement. And that's where we want to be. That's where we want to be. At the same time, think about the time period that we're in this country and in this state. There has been a move to put more police in schools, for zero tolerance policies, and in essence, there is no actual data that says that those kinds of policies actually have a positive impact on our children. Here we are, and in the last 5 years, this work has been proclaimed to be something that has really something that people in this community have a lot of pride in, and that it's been effective. And yet, money comes into play, like all the time. Money comes into play. And we're struggling with our budgets across the state of New York. And at this point, I say to myself, if something's not broken, I don't fix it. And if something is working, I keep it, and I try to even expand it. And what I really want to say is, it is time for us to also say, we demand as a community that this work continues, remains, and expands in this community. Because it is having the kind of impact that we need it to have. This is very personal work, and there have been so many people, many of you in this room, Lydia, Rodriguez, the youth who have put their heart and soul and hours of time through teen empowerment, through citizen action, the Alliance for Quality Education. So many of us have come together, and guess what? We stuck together and we said, we're not giving this up. We're not giving this up, because you ask any parent or you ask anyone in these communities, what is their concern? And their concern is that they want their children in a place where it is a joy to learn and it is a joy to teach. And teachers and principals are seeing that if they put these supports into place, it has that impact. It is common sense that if we provide the environment that listens to our students, that nurtures them, at the same time, when so many of our students are going through so much trauma, social emotional kind of supports are so necessary. The ROC restorative team of the Rochester City School District is doing an incredible job. This is not a job to them. I need to say that. I interviewed one of the coaches here. I think he's around here somewhere. But his words struck me as true. You cannot just go into this as a job. You have to believe it from your gut. You have to believe in our students. You have to believe in a different way. And that's what we are advocating for here today. And we are now know that, because there's no data, I mean, you can't, like, you look at the data, either you pass or you fail, right? There's no disputing that. And it's having an impact. I'd like to bring up Caterina, who has welcomed us not once, but now twice to her school, and has actually been...
Thank you. And I think, as Rosemary said, this is not something you do, it's a way of being. Restorative practice is in our essence and in our core. In that, we have prioritized student voice and student engagement. So at this time, I'm going to ask that my students and my providers from Center for Youth and Gandhi Institute step up and just kind of come around this area. Yeah, so we can be ready to queue up. Just as a quick glance, we're about 633 students. We serve students from 3 years old to 6th grade, to 8th grade here, so up to age 16. We are 96.3% poverty, 14.4% students with disability, and almost 1/3 English language learners. We do host a special dual language program here with a high Latino population, about 56%, 34% African American, 8% white, and 2% Asian or other. One thing we believe at our core is that it's our responsibility to serve as a beacon in the center of an urban village. We consider Rochester, the Josana neighborhood, our village. We want to be the heart of this community. We want to be the access point for resources through the community school model. And we recognize that every day we do our best to be our best self. We focus on learning and growing, following our Adams expectation, but most importantly, we've added a commitment to use our actions and words to promote peace, love, and caring in our world. We say this every morning. We say it, we believe it as staff, we believe it as parents, we believe it as students who you'll hear from. We have taken the whole approach for this school and the school turnaround, coming from one of the lowest performing schools in the entire state, cited in 2015-16 as one of 20 designated persistently violent and dangerous schools. We have risen out of receivership. We have risen beyond the category of even the watch category for violence, and we've done so honestly, collaboratively, and through a focus on working everything within the category of width. Conflict is inevitable. Conflict is unavoidable. It's how we handle it, how we look within the sphere of our own influence and begin to learn methods of problem solving. We know that trauma penetrates our community to a depth beyond our realization, beyond many of our own personal experiences. And with trauma comes our survival instinct. Our survival instinct drives us to either fight, flight, or freeze. If we can't deal with fight, flight, freeze, we can't face the problem. We can't break it down. We can't learn a different way. And so we use this trauma-informed practice to frame our thinking. And so when we see a stress response that looks like fight, flight, or freeze, we don't overreact. We don't look at it as, oh, you're being disrespectful, oh, you're being violent. We look at it as what it is, survival. We know we have to process that physiological response before we can get to the psychological and the learning. And so we allow for a multi-tiered system of support to do that. Preventative things at the core to build positive relationships. We're a family, we're a community, we're united. And we have to work at that. We also look at flexible supports that you'll hear from today, and then individualized intensive services. So, how do I know it works? And these are just numbers at a glance. There's some material there. We went from nearly 3,000 days of suspension in 2015-16 to 217 to date. And that's a little bit of a skewed number because 100 of those days are in one serious weapons involving incident. So outside of that, it would be 117. Our school violence index, which the watch level for New York State is 1.0. It's a ratio of weighted incidents to the number of students enrolled. In 2015-16 was 2.29. To date, we are at 0.10. Overnight. This has been hard work. It's been the work of every individual, no matter what the age, here in this building. We start each day a morning meeting. We have a classroom circle. This builds our community. We greet each other by face and name and some sort of gesture. The kids decide what that is. We do a team building activity and we preview the day. We do a morning message. This allows for predictability. There's not surprises. It reduces anxiety. There's a sense of belonging. We know that there's crisis situations, and to deal with that stress response, we have a safe room. This is a safe space where you will not injure yourself, you will not injure others, but you will process that physical energy on the trampoline, with a basketball, with a punching bag, with a rocking chair, in some sort of way, till we can address and process that physiological response to get to the psychological angle and hook you up with the resources you're going to hear about. We are going to offer a tour after the press conference of these spaces that will be student-led as well. And remember, as you walk, that the school is still in process and that incidents are a normal part. And it's Valentine's Day, which is one of the funnest days. That's a grammatically correct term in elementary school. But one of the most emotionally charged days that we've experienced throughout the year. So everything will be in action. So to talk about the reflection room, I want to bring up Veronica Rush and Sammy and Mitch. Step on up. Crisis workers from the Center for Youth Services. She works in our reflection room with mostly students in grades kinder through 4. Step on back here, guys. It's okay, Sammy. Sorry.
Thank you for the media. Hi, I'm Veronica Rush, and I am here to speak about the reflection room. Every student that enters the reflection room knows that the reflection room is a safe place. They can share their emotions and talk about reflection. It is our duty as a community to build up our students and care and love for them. All of our students now have the tools that they feel empowered, and now they can resolve future conflicts peacefully. Here at School 17, our diversity is our strength. Thank you. Now I have Sam. Sam has his speech right here in his hand. He is very nervous, just like I am, so please bear with him. Sam, are you ready?
Hello, my name is Sammy. I am in 2nd grade. I have lots of energy. I like the reflection room because it is my safe place where I can play and talk about my feelings. I enjoy using different tools in my calm down kit to feel calm. I love Miss Rush because she makes me feel safe.
Now we have
I heard her dropping the line. Well, at least you got the job done before you passed out,
first
right?
grader, and Mitch would love to share why he uses the reflection room so much.
Hi, my name is Mitch. I am in 1st grade. I love coming to the reflection room to relax and take deep breaths.
She is a 4th grader, and she loves the reflection room to use mindfulness. Please listen to her speech.
Hello, my name is Manaya. I like the reflection room for I
I can concentrate, and
What else do you do in the reflection room?
to practice yoga.
She's very flexible. She loves doing yoga and meditating in our room.
Thank you. A couple of things I forgot to mention was we did a lot of hard work in actually passing the code of conduct. Oh my God, I see Spiro there. It was a big part of it. And I see some of the folks from like the housing authority in here. I realized that in one of our schools, I think it was school number 7, the number of students who were experiencing homelessness through the McVeigh law was through the roof. And I want to remind people of the trauma that some of our students go through on a day-to-day basis. I have watched principals in our city school district arguing with bus drivers and telling them you cannot take them back to that address simply because there's no one going to be there. You have to know the relationships in the schools. All of this is based on relationships in terms of community. We are fighting to make the Rochester City School District a restorative district as a whole. And I wanted to mention that because we should be a restorative community as a whole. Caterina, and then, okay.
We have also, the restorative piece of our work involves the Gandhi Center and Center for Youth working together. Okay. And I will let him speak a little bit about the work he does in our help zone and in our mediation room.
Hi, everybody. So many of our students experience conflict on a daily basis, at home, at school, between teachers and peers. And unfortunately, it seems that the most common responses to these conflicts are blame, judgment, retaliation, revenge, and violence. Restorative practices, in particular the restorative spaces at School 17, the help zones for the younger and older kids, and our conflict resolution space. These rooms are like little islands of sanity where everybody gets to take a breath, pause, kids get their social, emotional needs met, and they're supported to find nonviolent solutions to their problems. I've been at 17 for 4 years now, and the change in the building has been noticeable. Culture feels different, mindsets of adults are shifting, as are the mindsets of our students, who you are about to hear from.
Hi, my name is Daciana, and I use the help zone to calm down, to reflect, and to think and talk about my problems, and to express my feelings. The reason I go to the help zone is not for arguing or fighting with other students, but for arguing with my teacher. Sometimes cursing her out, or maybe for ignoring her. When I'm in the help zone, I talk about my problems, or maybe write a reflection. And I always remember, it's the help zone, not the escape zone.
My name is Christopher. I'm in the 8th grade, and the help zone is a place to calm down and get things off your chest. It helps you to make sure you don't make the same mistakes when you go back to class. Sometimes I get sent down to the help zone for cursing out my teachers, not sitting where I'm supposed to, and basically just messing around. If the help zone wasn't there, I'll probably be getting more frustrated problem I wasn't doing as good as I am in school.
I use the help zone to calm myself down when I'm mad, and to control my anger and temper, and to stop me from fighting people. I used to have lots of mediations with boys and girls I used to have problems with. Now I don't have as much problems because I know that there's a help zone to help me out, and I can talk about everything.
All right.
My name is Barry. I'm in 7th grade, and I have used the help zone to cool down and basically talk to others about how I feel. Sometimes I have issues with both boys and females, and when we mediate, it helps us explain how we feel and get things off our chest. And if I didn't have the mediation room or the help zone, I'll probably be suspended and more fights.
Hi, my name is Rivera. I'm in 7th grade. I used to use the help zone almost every day and have mediations and calm myself down. I used to have a lot of drama in the beginning of the year and used to go to help zone a lot. But I got help, and now I know there's a place to go if I need help.
Responsible not only for the incorporation of social justice and nonviolence education in all of our work, but that we are, what guys? Agents of change. Agents of Change 365. And as such, we want to recognize the important work of the Rochester Community Task Force. Here we have something for you guys with our students' work on it in representation, just as a symbol of the hard work. I was part of it. I know the struggle. We are part of teaching peace and the importance of doing so in students' own words. So from the students and staff in Enrico Fermi School 17, on behalf of them, I present you with this plaque for use in your space.
I know a lot of people here are members of the task force and have been in the past, so could you, if you're not already standing, could you please stand and just be recognized?
All right. So next, thank you. That is amazing. It is really beautiful. That's truly beautiful. This reminds me that we are talking, a lot of times the students that we have seen that I see throughout the country. And I just want to say, how many of us remember when we were kids and we had a bad day? Okay? I had a bad day when I was a kid. I still have bad days. Bad hair days and everything else.
Yeah, right.
The reality is, we can't expect our children to always have perfect days. They are little packages of humans that have all kinds of feelings and all kinds of things that go on, and all kinds of environmental stuff affects them on a day-to-day basis. And what we've seen in this country has been a push-out and has been disgraceful at best. Because if you're not in school, and you're not learning in school, there's somebody out there on a street corner that's going to be very happy to teach you something that you should not be learning. And I gotta say that keeping kids in school is having that academic impact that we need. I want to bring up a member of our community task force, a true blood, Ricardo. Would you like to come out? All right.
First of all, I'd like to say Happy Valentine's Day.
Same to you.
Also, I'd like to acknowledge that this is Black History Month. I have two daughters in the city school district, one in 7th grade and one in 5th grade. When I first started, as a new parent a few years back, I thought something was wrong with my kids. I really did, right? Until I took them into the pre-K and looked around, and all the other kids was acting the same way. My kids are normal. So, but anyway, I went to an education conference, and they told me the climate in the classroom is what can have a big effect and influence on the kids. Reducing class size is one of the things that has that effect. So the way, financially, they're not going to reduce class sizes. So I was told, if I go in the class and present and volunteer on a daily basis, that reduces, me being an adult, that reduces the class size. I've been doing that for the last 8 years. I decided that wasn't enough back in 2015, so I became a part of the task force. I started working at Center for Youth, overnight so I could go into schools in the morning and make that difference. And I have made a difference. Ask the kids. We asked ourselves back in 2015, how is teaching and learning going? We knew what we were doing wasn't working for far too many students, and that instead of being joyful and liberating, which is what education should be, it was stressful, negative, and frustrating. A lot has happened that is good since then, and much remains to be done. We cannot claim victory when there are still classrooms where teaching and learning is not joyful and productive. But what the data here shows is that inconclusive responses to students. Through implementing Dr. Joy DeGroove's relationship model by approaching students with supports instead of kicking them out immediately, and through interventions like help zones, social workers, just the whole rock restorative type thing, trauma-informed stuff. We still need the paradigm shift. We still need everyone to get on board. We are practicing a paradigm shift, not simply prescribing it. The shift from dominator to partnership is more than challenging. It requires unlearning of the conditioning we've all been exposed to in both personal socialization experiences and as members of various hierarchical organizations. We have intentionally worked from a partnership framework, valuing the power of all perspectives, including the voices of those who have historically been silenced, us parents. We've entered a new era of collaboration versus confrontation. We're all on the same side, and we work hard to be. No one is opposing the vision for transforming school climate and discipline described and to some extent codified in the code. We all know we have lots of work to do together and to implement it successfully. The question is always being called because all of us, whether we like it or not, are more comfortable operating in the framework that is familiar. If we are accustomed to powerlessness and never seeing any impact from our ideals, it is easy to walk away in frustration. For those accustomed to flexing power and authority, it is very easy to step in and dictate what is needed, what will work or what will not work, and to even undo collaborative work. Reverting to that old model that we know does not work for educating our children. So the question will persist, will the community task force process that has been built on inclusion and partnership, will this frame be disregarded, or will we continue to build collective power to achieve a shared vision? I sincerely hope that everyone involved will be tapping in and supporting our work and the educators who have invested much time and energy into this work. I ask you this for my girls, man, and the rest of the kids that I be representing, man. But my kids are only in 5th or 7th grade. They're going to be here for a while. I'm here calm and all that, but this is a crisis we're in. Yeah. So I thank you for your support.
Well done.
Because it's the report that is really what is underscoring what parents and community members and students have always known. And we always need some community who has developed people, because even grown-ups need development on a constant and continuous basis. And who also was a little bit of a wonky person, who actually, thank God, who can capture what we know in our hearts and in our guts is the right thing for our schools, and actually show us the data and give us even more power and leverage, who has fought for the Safe and Supportive Schools Act at the state level, which our code of conduct is actually aligned with, and this is a statewide bill that we are constantly pushing for, along with the culturally relevant education as well as ensuring that the Campaign for Fiscal Equity gets funded so that our leaders can actually maintain these programs and expand them. It's high time we have an excellent education. Eamon, thank you for your work so much. Come on.
Thank you so much, Rosemary. Thank you, everybody, for coming. That's a lot to live up to, and I really dedicate this to everybody else who's given countless hours over the last 5 years. I can't thank everybody because we're talking about 40-some organizations. I believe 40 schools now participate in this work. So many educators, parents, students, and they did an amazing job, and I love every one of them because that's what this work is about. I won't spend another day doing this job unless it has an impact on students and it improves their lives. So that's the bottom line. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the report that the Children's Agenda released in partnership with Teen Empowerment, the Alliance for Quality Education, Citizen Action of New York, the Community Task Force, a lot of other partners who put in their work as well, Community Foundation, and speak about what this report is. So the school to prison pipeline. There's a very famous study that showed that being suspended just once in 9th grade made a child twice as likely to drop out of school. Twice as likely to drop out of school. If you are a high school dropout, you are 8 times as likely as a high school graduate to end up in prison. That's the school to prison pipeline. It's robbing kids of their education, and many of those kids are ending up incarcerated, and it needs to stop. So the work that's been done in this district and in this community to move away from exclusionary discipline in the form of suspensions and expulsions and towards alternatives that get to the root of child's trauma, behavioral issues, and needs has really been a godsend, right? We have seen this huge reduction in suspensions over the last 5 years, and that really dropped dramatically after the new code of conduct was passed. A lot of us worked on this. It's a discipline policy that moves away from constantly using suspensions to alternatives like a help zone, like a mediation room or a peace room, or somewhere that a kid can go and be heard and work through their issues. So we saw really a dramatic reduction. In the last 2 years, suspensions have dropped by a third, 40% in 5 years. That's huge, a huge impact. And it's because of the great work in policy, it's because of the alternatives that have been put forward. So another piece of this report talks about the Rock Restorative Team. So what is the Rock Restorative Team? You've heard that several times. This is a group of coaches and also folks at central office that spread restorative practices and do professional learning throughout the district. And they've done that for really the past 3 years. And it's been 4 years, as part of a professional learning community. That, as I said before, has expanded to nearly 40 schools. It's 39 schools district-wide. We have a little over 50 schools in this district. And so more than half the schools in some way are engaging with this process, but they still need more support. And the Rock Restorative Team, they provide sort of a backbone of professional development, of direction and vision for this work. But then there are the heroes on the front lines. I don't want to use that war metaphor. The heroes where the rubber meets the road, right? The folks like Spiro and Veronica and Caterina, who every day infuse school climate into their buildings. And so we need to protect the Rock Restorative Team and the direction and professional development, but we also need those folks in the classrooms, in the buildings, that do the work every day and spread that. Now, I've talked a little bit about the building supports. What we found, and we conducted some interviews, members of the Community Task Force with principals and with other staff members, members of the Rock Restorative Team. A lot of this work has scaled up, but it only happens if it's genuine. You've heard that multiple times. What we found is that you need real buy-in. You need people to believe this. It's not a mandate, it's not something you can force. And that's why the Rock Restorative Team is so important, and these staff are so important, because it's not a switch that you flip. It's ongoing. It's a constant culture shift. And in this district, we have a lot of turnover. It's something that's well known, something that we also study. And there's going to be new people coming on board, switching between schools and buildings, administrators come and go. So we constantly need to readdress this issue of climate and move towards a restorative model. Now, those are some of the supports. I talked about the drop-in suspensions. You've heard this academics, and I think the graph's over there somewhere, but basically it looks almost exactly like this graph, right? Yes, the orange one. So suspensions are good. We want to reduce those, but the reason we want to reduce those is because suspensions have a very negative impact on student academics, as well as social emotional learning. There's other impacts. But if we want to cut to the chase, and are those kids going to do well in school if they're suspended? The truth is no. There's a lot of studies that show that. And so we asked, how many courses are kids failing who are suspended? And how did that change after we had this reduction in suspensions? Because you'd expect, if suspensions are pushing kids to fail their coursework, if we significantly reduce suspensions, we should significantly reduce course failure. That's what that graph shows. There were over 2,000 fewer course failures by suspended students. That's a huge impact. That may be the most important and successful academic intervention of the past 5 years. And we have another graph, and it shows the students who were not suspended and how many course failures they have. It's not very interesting because it's pretty much level. There was no real impact. This is where the impact is happening. When you're reducing suspensions, you're keeping kids in the classroom, you're meeting their needs, and they're passing more of their coursework. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is the positive impact. And it's not evenly distributed. A recommendation in this report I'll get back to is to reduce long-term suspensions and the length of long-term suspensions, because most of this drop that happened here, 60% of the drop, was among kids missing a cumulative of more than 10 days. And if you can imagine, if you've never been suspended, but if you were sick for a couple weeks in school, it was probably really hard to catch up. The more time you miss, the farther you fall behind, the more likely you're going to fail your coursework. So having suspensions that are 45 days long, that are months at a time, those are the kids who are not going to pass. And we need to significantly reduce that because the data shows and improves it. Those are the kids that are going to catch up if we don't do that. If we don't kick kids out for 20 days or more, we can actually keep them in the classroom and make sure that they pass their course. Some other pieces in the report, there's this beautiful diagram over here. There were focus groups done, particularly by Teen Empowerment, but by the whole community task force a couple years ago, talking to hundreds of parents, staff, and students. And they wanted to get their perspective on school climate, the things that they thought needed to exist. And everybody said, we need stronger relationships. We need more trust, and we need to build community. That came up in every group. It was one of the strongest themes. And that's what restorative practices is really about. If you had to put it in 2 words, it's relationship building. And so if we want to build those strong relationships, we need to support a restorative model. And that report will also be, the separate focus group report is on the Children's Agenda website, along with this report at www.childrensagenda.org. That's some amazing work that gets really to the narrative piece. This complements more of the data. A few other things I want to talk about, and there's so much in the report, so I'm actually flying through it. And there's so many pieces, things we didn't even cover. But the heart of the school-to-prison pipeline is this disparity in suspensions. There's thousands of suspensions, but who really pays the biggest price? It's our students of color, our black and brown, beautiful children in this district. It's also students with disabilities. It's students who are still learning English because they come from non-English speaking areas. They get suspended at the highest rates, right? We know that African American students get suspended 2.5 times as often as white students. 2.5 times as often. It's dramatic. All groups, all subgroups, all demographic, racial, ethnic groups have seen a decline in suspensions. This is positively impacting everybody. The gaps are closing, but the disparities still remain. There's still this 2.5 times rate difference. And that's because when we talk about bias and racism, that's a harder nut to crack. We can change policies around the use of a tool like suspension, but the hearts and minds and how we view and the things we don't even recognize and the way we treat people, that's not an easy fix.
there's a lot of great professional development that's gone on in the district, but we haven't moved the needle enough, and we need to continue to evaluate and work to make sure that we have the long-term investment in that, because that's not an easy fix. And just to give you some numbers, the two groups that are most impacted are Black students and students with disabilities. We saw a drop, but they're still very high. Students with disabilities, there are 44 suspensions for every 100 students right now, and that's a significant drop. And 33 suspensions for every 100 African American students. By comparison, there are 13 suspensions for every 100 white students. And another piece in this report, and something that the first report highlighted, was what are kids being suspended for, right? You think of suspension, there's fights, there's something really disruptive and wrong going on. But a lot of this was falling under this big, vague category called other disruptive incidents. It's a state category. It's something they have to report, as Caterina was talking about earlier, about their violence index and things that happen in schools. But really, it's just a catch-all that could be, I dropped my pencil, to I talk back, to I threw a bunch of books around the room, right? It's a wide swath, and a lot of bias happens in that vague wiggle room. So the biggest reduction, and really almost all of this reduction in suspensions, was in that category, other disruptive. There's been a 47% decline in other disruptive incidents in the last 5 years. It's huge, huge drop. And then a couple final pieces. So where do most suspensions happen? They happen in middle school. They happen in the transition from the K through 6 buildings into 7th grade and then into early high school. And we saw this massive spike that happened really from when a kid's 11 to 12. It's like a mountain, and there's a graph in there that shows this. That's this arbitrariness that happens, and what does that mean? That's that transition. It's when you move from one building to the next, you don't know as many people, you don't have adults you can trust, you don't have those relationships. You're on the bottom of the social hierarchy, so you're getting into fights and you're scrapping just to be somebody, right? So that's where we need those intensive supports. And that's also where the biggest impact is had. For 13-year-olds who have the highest rate of suspensions, 5 years ago it was 103 suspensions for every 100 students, right? More suspensions were handed out than students. That's also where the biggest reductions happened. It's now 60 for every 100. Still far too high, but that's a 42% decrease. That's massive. And that's also where the interventions have been. The help zones, it's in buildings like this that are K through 8s, that are high schools. That's where the focus has been. But we need to expand. And the data also show that in the K through 6 buildings, we haven't really moved the needle very much. And that's because we haven't focused on those. So part of expanding is expanding into K through 6s. The suspensions are lower there, but the damaging effects are all the same. Every student, every grade, it's the same. So I'm just going to leave you with a few of our recommendations that they're in the report. Like I said before, we want to expand and deepen restorative practices. This needs to be in every school. We need the building staff who can do the work ongoing. We need the Rock Restorative team in place to carry the work and have the vision. We need to ban suspensions in K through 2. This is because, one, I don't understand what a kindergarten needs to miss a week of school for, but really, if we want every kid reading by 3rd grade, we need to remove every impediment to that goal. And there's a very good study that shows each additional day a student misses of school to suspension, their reading scores go down farther and farther, right? It's not rocket science. We need to remove that barrier. We need to treat those kids with developing appropriate interventions. We need to limit long-term suspensions. I talked about that's where the drop's been. We can't just warehouse kids. We can't push them out for these indeterminate long amounts of time. We need to reintegrate and get a real solution that addresses why a kid was either extremely disruptive or what that serious incident was. And we need a robust data sharing agreement with Rock the Future and the City School District to dive deeper into these issues, because this is some great data. I asked for some more data and I didn't get it. and this took months. And I understand there's a lot of pressures, there's a lot of complicated things going on, but folks like me who don't get paid by the district would be more than happy to do this deep dive and to be a support. And we need to leverage that. The last to is, this is one piece, but there's a lot of work that's gone on for 5 years. There was an advisory group called the School Climate Advisory Committee. They have a whole other document of recommendations. We need to take those seriously, adopt those recommendations that go even beyond what this report talks about. And finally, the code of conduct, which that line right there shows that dramatic impact happened after we had that policy and we made things a little more concrete around when you can and cannot suspend kids. It's been 2.5 years since that was enacted. We need to make sure everybody's trained on it. We need to make it the force of law, of reality of what kids are being held to. So it's important that every staff member is trained on that policy and it just becomes ingrained in everything that's done in this district. So that's it for me. Thank you all again. I'm going to turn it over to Rosemary.
Thank you so much. Actually, I just thought that at the end, maybe you guys from the media had some questions for Eamon in particular regarding the data itself. I'll open it up for you.
I think we'll take you. We'll do it.
We'll take them to the side? They're going to grill you on the side, okay? All right, that sounds good. I want to thank everybody for showing up. Remember that we have some tours happening. The school has been setting up spaces, and you should check them out. I'll never forget the little story that I had just on the sidekick. We had this, it was my first time going, and I'm going, oh my God. You can have policy all day long, but if it's not being implemented, and actually being taken care of and being pushed forward, it's like nothing. You got a piece of paper there, right? So Caterina, since she worked with the CTF at the beginning, started implementing the thoughts and the ideas as we were putting all this stuff together. And I came in one day, and there was this kid who used to, I won't mention names, but I don't remember them, but apparently likes to spit a lot. And she would take him in, and he'd have this room that was, an ability for him to do whatever he needed to do, and spitting was his thing of getting it out. And then she would hand him Windex and a thing and say, okay, you're all set? Now you can wipe it up. Because discipline doesn't mean that you don't have consequences. It means that we teach you, right? So it's interesting. I just wanted to say thank you. This work is really important to me personally, with my children in this district and my grandchildren in this district. And I just want to thank for the people that stick and stay. It's just, thank you.
And one thing I forgot, I just want to recognize Linda and Dan who are here.
Oh my God.
Full circle, because the code of conduct was actually passed when Linda was serving as interim. So
thank you so much, everyone. That data means let's keep it moving, and all of you, write to your legislators, to your assembly people, and talk to them, because we need the funds, and the foundation formula and the amount of money that they're putting into it, it's going to make us see a lot of pain rather than a lot of growth. Thanks.
Thank you.